Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is a live Q&A where you can ask me pretty much anything you want in the world of careers and job search. That's what this is for. This is episode 136. This is called How to Negotiate Salary. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to give a little sort of brief talk on salary, and then we're going to open it up to questions, right? A brief talk on negotiation, I'd say. Negotiation. That's what we're going to be talking about. I hope you guys like my hair. I did it for you, so just never forget that. Okay, public service announcement. Special thanks goes out to all my YouTube channel members. Membership has its privileges. My Patreons, my super thanks donors, and to you, my participants, and my viewers and my participants. You guys are awesome. If you weren't here, I wouldn't be here. Put it that way. So let's jump right in. We're going to be talking about salary negotiation. This is an area that a lot of people have a lot of questions about all the time, and it's another one of those areas where you hear like the sort of conventional wisdom, the stuff that everybody always says, and then they don't really touch a lot of the major aspects of it. So I'd like to think I'm going to give you sort of the lowdown. This is how I've regarded negotiation and salary negotiation as part of it. So let's jump in. And I figured the way I would do this, because I want to contrast how you actually do this as opposed to how a lot of people like to say you do it. We're going to start with the sort of how they say you do it. And my version of that was going to ChatGPT and just asking, say, how do you negotiate salary? And seeing what it says, and we're going to pick this apart. So here we go. So you could do this yourself. Hopefully you're also using tools like ChatGPT. I'm here to encourage you to do that if you aren't already using these kinds of AI tools. They're not the be-all, end-all, but they're damn useful for certain things. So you should be doing it. Now, let's start by looking at what the conventional wisdom is when they talk about negotiating salary. So I just typed in how to negotiate salary, and this is what it said. So there's several points here. Number one, do your research. This is where you look at, your salary range. You can look at it online. There's been various websites that have helped with this over the years. Glassdoor.com, payscale.com, salary.com, things like this. They have certain uses, For example, if you're moving countries or regions or cities, getting an idea of like what the cost of living is in another city, or what the average salary is for, or the compensation is for your role, it can be pretty useful, right? But some other times their salary information can be wildly inaccurate, so just keep that in mind. But I mean, most people would know this by the virtue of like having a job before. You might have an idea of what, what's a reasonable amount of money to pay. Now we get into the persuasion here and the psychology behind this stuff. We're going to talk about this. So there's a lot of little psychological rules. You've probably all heard these. Like, instead of saying, I want this, you would say, like, I feel I deserve this based on insert reason, right? This is kind of what people talk about when they talk about salary negotiation, which isn't negotiation at all, by the way. It's persuasion. It's two separate things, right? So instead of saying I need more money, say, based on my experience, blah, 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 I believe this is fair, whatever, because of a certain reason. Just little psychobabble type rules here. Let them go first if possible. That thing where whoever starts first anchors the value, and then it's hard to shift it from that. Yeah, that's a thing, but it's not as useful as you might think. Stay calm. See, once again, this is all like the psychology behind it. Now, this is actually useful. We're going to be getting into this later, where the deal is a system. We're going to be talking about that and know when to close. Okay, so this is actually pretty good here. The thing to remember: employers expect you to negotiate. If you don't, you may be leaving 5 to 15% or more on the table every single year. This is true sometimes. A lot of times it's true. Not always, right? If you're going for a minimum wage job, it's a manual labor job, or you're going for a job where like you're one of 130 people in the same role, a lot of times you can't negotiate. This is what we pay, end of story, if you try and go persuade them to give you more, it just doesn't work, right? So this is what people talk about when they talk about, salary negotiation, at least out in the real world where you hear people advising you about this. Unfortunately, this is not salary negotiation. This is some weird sort of version of persuasion and psychology that does come into the discussion, yes. But is it the be-all, end-all? No. Is it the meat and potatoes of what negotiation is all about? Absolutely not. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about negotiation actually is and how it actually works. And we're contrasting it to this kind of stuff that you've probably already heard. Okay, I'm going to adjust my camera brightnesses because, once again, it's a partly cloudy day. And I don't have an auto brightness thing on my setup here, being so professional, as the professional YouTuber I am. Okay, let's get into it. So, if you're watching this, and there are 15 people watching it, thank you for being here. Know this. Negotiation is not the same thing as persuasion. Those are two separate, entirely separate things, okay? And the problem is, when you want to talk about negotiation, a lot of times when you go online and you look up, what people are saying about it, at least like for free, it's this sort of very pretty kind of version of persuasion that they're dressing up as negotiation, right? Now, persuasion, hopefully everybody knows, that's when you're trying to convince somebody of something. I got to turn my camera brightness down again. God. Persuasion is when you're almost trying to sell something. You're trying to convince somebody of something using logic, using other techniques, right? That's what persuasion is. So, for example, a lot of negotiation tips you might hear are about trying to convince the other party that your side of the argument is reasonable, right? So that has its place, right? But that is not negotiation. Negotiation is the crafting of an agreement, usually between two parties that have completely polar opposite incentives, right? And when we're talking about things like salary negotiation for an employment contract, right? Oh, this is ridiculous. This is just, I would like to put this on like an auto contrast or auto brightness thing, but the problem is for some reason the auto brightness, it regulates everything to be super, super dark. So I can't do that. Anyway, as I was saying, often the parties that are negotiating in a employment contract, you have completely polar opposite incentives. The employee or the candidate is trying to get as much money as they possibly can from the employer, right? And the employer is trying to get the employee to work for them for as little money as they'll possibly accept, right? So you have completely polar opposite incentives on this one. So therefore, even if you convinced the other party that your position is reasonable, that still might not hold any water. It often doesn't, because they just say, well, that makes a lot of sense, but unfortunately, this is what we pay, so take it or leave it, which is not actually true, but that's their attitude, right? It's like, great, but we pay this and we want to get you for as little as possible. We feel that we should be able to get you for as little as possible. End of story. It's not about persuading. They're not open to being persuaded, right? So a lot of the negotiation tactics that you often hear about often don't work in those situations because the person has just closed their mind. It's not about persuading them. Now, if you're trying to negotiate a raise or something like that, then it's more about persuasion. Maybe you're talking to your boss and you have like a very good personal relationship and things like this, so you it becomes more about sort of convincing them that you're being reasonable and things like this. And they go, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So fair enough, to keep you happy, we will give you what you want. And, we don't want you to leave, right? So then those things come into play. However, if you're getting hired for the first time, if you're going to job interviews and then you get an offer and, you have to do negotiation of the employment contract as part of your offer, then persuasion often doesn't work. They don't have a relationship really with you, right? So let's get into what negotiation actually is. Negotiation is a much more cold process. It's de-romanticized. It's not about persuasion. It's not about people, seeing your side of it. It's about what makes sense for you and what doesn't, right? The other party is going to have their version of that. The first thing you need to know is that you have something called a reservation price. That's the minimum amount of money that you will take to do this job before it no longer makes sense to you. And number one rule of negotiation is always go into negotiation knowing what your reservation price is. If they offer less than this amount, you'll walk away. What is that amount, right? A lot of people, they'll take anything down to minimum wage, okay? But if you're some kind of professional, you have a degree in law and antennas and, science and biology and the life cycle of the Peruvian moth, right? Maybe you're in high demand and you don't have to take minimum wage. Every job you've had has been for multiple times minimum wage. If they offer you minimum wage, you're going to say, no, it doesn't make sense for me. Besides, I can afford to turn this down, even if I don't have anything else in hand. It still makes sense for me, right? So you know what your reservation price is before you walk in there. That's the minimum amount of money you'll take. If they won't give you that much, sorry, can't take it. Then you get up and leave. You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense for you. So the first step is to know that. Now they're going to have their reservation price too. Okay, that's the maximum amount they would ever pay you. So if you walk in there and say, I need, $1 million plus 5, $1.5 million, they say, absolutely not. Thank you for your time, right? Because it's above their reservation price, right? So they've got a reservation price and you've got a reservation price. Now, hopefully, there's some space between them, right? If the lowest amount you would take would be, say, 10, and the lowest they would ever pay is 20, or the most they'd ever pay is 20, well, you've got some space between those. You have what they call a zone of possible agreement, ZOPA, where, anywhere between 10 and 20, there's room to make a deal, right? Sometimes you walk into a situation where there is no zone of possible agreement, right? If you go in there and say, well, the least I would ever take is 20, right? And they say, going into the negotiation, oh, the most we would ever pay is 10, right? Then it's not possible to have an agreement, right? So sometimes you'll encounter that in the real world, right? There's just, they could never pay you the minimum of what you would ever accept, right? So like these are some like fundamental concepts. So the idea is that they're going to have their reservation price, you have yours, you know what yours is, and you've resigned yourself before you even begin that, like, I need this, and if I can't get that, sorry, doesn't make sense. Right? You need to know. A lot of people, especially when they're inexperienced, they haven't thought about this before. They go in thinking like, oh, let's see what they say, and then you walk out of there with something like that's really not a good deal. You're working far below your value, or at least what you could have gotten here or other places, right? So that's the idea. Okay? So reservation price, everybody should know what that is. Your reservation price, their reservation price. And depending on what those two numbers are, you can have a zone of possible agreement. Okay, so there has to be a zone of possible agreement, or it doesn't make any sense. But you end the process right there. Now the problem is that we know our reservation price, but we don't always know theirs. That's the problem. And they're going to try and keep their reservation price secret from you. They're not going to disclose that. You can try various techniques and say, listen, so what is the budget for this role? Right? You can come in there and you can say like, They say, how much money do you need? And you say, like, well, I care more about, work challenges and getting along with people. What budget did you have in mind? Things like this, right? And you can try and do things like this that will get them to hopefully reveal their reservation price, even though they probably tell you a lie when they say this is the budget. Anybody who knows what they're doing, they're not going to just disclose it. It's like playing poker, right? If someone says, can I just see your cards for a second? You say no, right? You see, number one rule of poker. That's actually the first rule in poker. Right? So, so reservation price, you know yours, but you don't know theirs. That's the challenge, right? What you can do is you can probe. You can basically, every time I adjust this brightness, the sun comes out and it ruins everything. From the dawn of time, man has longed to destroy the sun. And someday soon, with AI, I think we will finally get there. Let's see. So we're talking about reservation prices. We're talking about the fact that you know yours, but you don't know theirs. You know what's the minimum you'd accept. You don't know what's the maximum they would ever pay. That's the catch, right? So we do this by probing and saying, like, look, I'm going to need this. And they say, absolutely not. You know what I mean? But then you can sort of get them to come somewhere near that. You're like, okay, obviously that's something that's within their reservation price, right? So there you go. Now, the other fundamental concept in negotiation is something called a BATNA. BATNA. Best even call this up because I'm too cheap to have slides, right? So so let's see if I can just get ChatGPT to become my slides for a moment. Okay, can you give a definition of BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement? Let's see what this thing says. And then everybody can see what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, here we go. So BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The course of action you will take if a negotiation fails and if no agreement is reached. Okay? So the idea is that when you negotiate with somebody, you can have a backup, an alternative. So if this falls through and you can't come to an agreement, right? You've got another option in your back pocket. That's the idea. Okay? So you don't have to take what these people give you. You have an alternative, right? So for example, let's say you got an offer, a job offer already in your back pocket for 15, right? And you're here negotiating with these other people, seeing if they'll pay more than 15. And if they do, you'll probably take this. Now, if these people, the highest they'll ever go is, say, 12, you can say, sorry, no deal, goodbye, because you've got an offer for 15 in your back pocket. Why do you take an offer for 12 when you already have somebody offering you 15, right? So that's your alternative. So that's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So if this falls through, you got something in your back pocket. And that is the secret of negotiation, to have other options. That's how this works. If you go in there and your only choice is, if you're negotiating salary, you're negotiating a job offer, and your only choices are take whatever these people give you or unemployment, right? Let's say those are your two options, right? You don't have a lot of negotiating power. You're kind of at these people's mercy if you don't want the other option, which is unemployment, right? So you don't have a lot of power to push back, right? You sort of have to take what they give you. And they can do what most people do and say, I don't care how persuasive your argument is. Sorry, this is the offer, take it or leave it. It doesn't have to be reasonable, as long as it's legal, but, doesn't have to be reasonable. I don't care you've got 4 PhDs. Sorry, we pay minimum wage. Take it or leave it. Yeah, that's a very clever, convincing argument, the type of argument that one needs 4 PhDs to make, which I see every day. And you can tell at a glance. But unfortunately, we pay this, offers for minimum wage, Yes or no? Right? So if you have no alternative, you have to take what they give you, right? So negotiating power, negotiating leverage, whatever you want to call it, comes from having alternatives, right? Now, let's pretend you don't have a job offer in your back pocket, but you do have 6 job interviews lined up for next week, right? Of companies that you've applied to that want to talk to you, right? They're bringing you in for an interview. Is that an alternative? No, but it's something you kind of have. You could say, well, look, the odds of one of these coming through in some way is favorable, so I don't have to take something that's far below what I want here, right? It's all very kind of nebulous when you're a person looking for a job, but it's the same basic idea. Okay? So that's the crux of negotiation, is having alternatives. So what you should do to give yourself negotiating power is to have alternatives, right? Because then you're able to say, look, I don't have to take this. I got something else going on, so thanks for your time. Have yourself a great day, right? And that's the reality. Without any of the psychology, without any of the persuasion stuff, that's the reality. It's not about persuading anyone. It's not about convincing anyone that you're reasonable, right? It's about getting them to sign an agreement, okay? And at the end of the day, that's what negotiation is, and that's what I feel is not taught or is not sort of talked about enough. Because a lot of times, as I'm sure a lot of you guys will know, people aren't super reasonable, right? They're playing hardball, and it's not a matter of convincing them. They are immune to being convinced, and they are immune to reasonable arguments, right? They're pushing for as much as they can get, just as you are pushing for as much as you can get, right? Okay, let's go over to questions briefly. I have more to say about this, but let's just take a break and handle some questions. So there's 25 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Freedom Lands says thank you. You're welcome. Mehmet says, hi, Bill. The salaries are fixed in my industry and in my country. The only way is to get paid more is to get management roles. Okay, well, then I guess you should just jump off a cliff. Yeah, that's exactly what they would love you to think. And they're doing a very good job of convincing you that that's true. I'm sure that's absolutely true for a lot of people. Is that true for everyone? No, it's not. They would love you to think that. They would love you to think that you have no alternative than to take what they have. That's what all their skill, all their learning, all their efforts go towards, is convincing you this is the best thing you can get, and you should take it. So I don't know, in your situation, specifically what your industry is, in your region, whatever that is, I don't know if that's true or not, but what I can tell you is that statement is exactly what all their efforts are tailored towards achieving, having you think that. That's all I can say. Kind of coincidental. Matthew Harding says, what should be considered when negotiating salary for a remote position as opposed to on-site or hybrid role? Do some companies treat compensation differently for remote work positions? Companies do everything you could possibly imagine, no matter how ridiculous or unscientific or false an idea is. There will always be several companies out there that are implementing it. The world is a rich tapestry of people with different opinions and worldviews, and that includes this stuff. In fact, you may have noticed this, but every single organization approaches how to value someone slightly differently, right? Every department approaches it slightly differently, and every individual approaches it slightly differently. It is a very pseudo-scientific thing. How do I know this? Well, for a start, I used to teach a course on this in university. It was called Total Compensation. And Mehmet was talking about like management compensation, like executive compensation, where they have like lots of other ways of compensating you. This course was purely on worker compensation, and we barely scratched the surface in this course of how companies, have different methodologies for placing value on an employee, and then how the salary or the compensation sort of is tied to that, right? It's very complex, right? And at the end of the day, You don't have to understand how they think. You don't have to understand how they value things. You just need the practical outcome of them agreeing, right? And the good news is that that's what negotiation is. You like that? That's what negotiation is, right? It just like, look, this is my offer. Sign it, sign it, or I'm walking away. If here's my offer, I'm going to leave now. If you do want to continue this, let me know. Otherwise, what is it? I'll get back to you, which of course means I will never get back to you, and we're ending this. That's what that means. Okay, so remote work, is that like something that you should take a step down in your compensation, or should you take a step up because it's more efficient? You don't have to commute an hour and a half each way like some people have to. You could just get started. You have less expenses at home because you're not paying for gas or maintenance on a vehicle to commute or whatever. No matter what lifestyle you have, if you drive a car or whatever, it's more efficient. So some companies look at it one way, some companies look at it the other way, right? Companies that are paranoid, who don't trust their employees, it's called like Theory X thinking. That's where they make the assumption that all employees will do the least possible to keep their job, and that the role of management is to supervise them, to watch them and whip them hard, because that's the only way to persuade them to actually do their job, right? That's called Theory X thinking. Theory Y is the opposite. You might see that in some startups where they say like, look, my job as a boss is to hire the best people and then get the hell out of their way. Give them the resources they want, and to just give them freedom to go and do their thing. We hired this expert on this so that they could bring that expertise here. I'm not going to hire them as an expert, then tell them they can't do anything that they want to do. You know what I mean? And I'm also hiring them because I know that they're good at this and they enjoy doing it. So why would I have to stand over them and whip them and, question them every time they take an extra 2 minutes for a bathroom break or something? Like, you know what I mean? Like that's ridiculous. That's going to piss them off. It's going to make them disgruntled. They're going to leave, right? I need to just fan the flame of this talented person and let them do things their way, and then they'll produce amazing results. That's called Theory Y thinking. Usually we get a combination of those two in the real world. You don't really see extreme examples of it, but I've seen some extreme examples of Theory X, I can tell you. You know what I mean? So those different approaches will take different attitudes towards remote work, for example. The Theory X people will resist it tooth and claw, I should say. I think that's the expression. Theory Y people, they'll be like, hey, whatever you need, hey, if that makes you more efficient, if you produce better results, I'm all for it. And if it's more efficient for you, you can get more hours in the day and you don't have to have these commuting expenses. Sure. So how do you like that for a non-answer? The answer is that you get both. You get people that do treat it differently. You get people that do regard it as the same thing. They don't have a problem with it, right? You can use it when we talk about deal as a system, and we're going to do that in a moment. Semi says something nice. Thank you, Semi. Check. Audio issues are there. Oh, okay. Now, I had a problem with the mic cable. See, here's my microphone, and I had a cable issue a couple of weeks ago. This cable, I don't know if you can see it, this cable right here, I replaced it. So it was causing cutouts. Hopefully that's not what you guys are experiencing. Let me know if it is, okay? And I will jiggle my microphone accordingly. You'll like it. It's very hot. Okay. Thank you to Tito. Freedom Land says, how soon after being hired should I renegotiate? Okay. I'm excited about the MBA course you offer. I want to know if an employer will respect it if I put on a resume or mention interview. I have absolutely no control over that. Some will, some won't. It's unaccredited. It's not like that's not what I'm going for here. You have plenty of options to get an accredited MBA. You have to pay through the nose for a lot of them, but there are many options. This is not what I'm trying to offer. I'm offering something for $100. Okay, like not 100,000, $100, like nothing, absolutely nothing. And what it is, it's a way to give people the knowledge. Okay, what you're doing is you're basically getting a reading list, okay, of textbooks. It's the same textbooks they use when you go to Harvard Business School and you take their MBA program. You're paying $250,000 for this, and you're taking these like 12 courses or whatever it is, and you have to get these books. That's what each course is covering. They're basically taught out of a book these days, Harvard included, and some of the best schools in the world included. And what I'm doing is I'm providing you a reading list, and I'm giving you links, because you can get these books off Amazon. You can get slightly older versions of them off Amazon for like $10 or something, you know? So what I'm doing is I'm giving you the reading list, saying, if you know, this is what you would take in an MBA program, okay, like these 12 courses or whatever. And I'm providing videos that guide you through it. And, you know, I give you sort of my take on stuff. This is the important stuff in this course. This is less important. This is my personal experience with these concepts and how they, you know, enter the picture. You know, all of that for $100. You can get the books wherever you want. You can get ebooks. You can get physical textbooks, which I still recommend because you can annotate them. You could buy them all new and pay a lot more, or you could buy slightly older editions, which I actually recommend, you know, for like extremely cheap, and do it that way. So that's what it is. It's about giving people the knowledge, and that really enters the game when we talk about entrepreneurship, right? You're not trying to press anyone. You're trying to create something that works, that you make your money off. And to a lesser degree, it's so that you could work a regular job in a large organization and apply the principles of business, right? Business is the scientific study of how to make money. And this is what you're learning. Okay, so that's the deal. So hopefully that makes sense. Mehmet says, what are your courses other than Get Hired? Well, they're on the screen. I have 3 courses, and they're all on the screen. So you got the Get Hired course, you got the $100 MBA course for learning business, and then you've got this course for improving your communication skills. And the people that are looking for like jobs, that kind of stuff, you probably care about this. People who are looking to get promoted, or they want to be upwardly mobile, shall we say, you would probably want this, right? In that course, I put everything that I've learned from going from a supervisor to a CEO when it comes to communication skills. I put them all into that course, right? So you got to tack on a lot of things when you climb the ladder. Communication skills is one. They're one of the things you have to learn, and that's what that course is about. Okay, and if you just want to learn business, you want to start a business or do a side hustle, something like that, this can be very, very useful. Anyway, let's get back to negotiation. Okay, so there's one other concept I wanted to introduce to everybody, and that is that the deal is a system. Okay, so when you talk about negotiation, often we talk about salary negotiation, which is the title of this live stream, right? But salary is like sort of one dimension, right? It's a number. And it's because it's one dimension, it's like a win-lose type of thing. They could pay you more or they could pay you less. If they pay you less, you lose and they win. If they pay you more, you win and they lose, right? In a sense, right? They're giving something up that they value and they're giving it to you, right? Now, it is possible to have like a win-win where they give you something that's of incredible value to you, but they also get something back from you that's of incredible value to them. And that's when the deal is sort of multidimensional, right? You're not just talking salary. You're talking other things. Things like vacation. Things like remote work, like that somebody mentioned. Freedom Lands mentioned remote work, right? So these are things that you could say, look, okay, if you can't budge on the salary or on the compensation, you know, the pay or the wage or whatever it is, the salary, okay, I could get that, but give me 5 more vacation days a year and I'll consider it, kind of thing, right? So you're saying like, okay, you want this, well, I want that. I value this, you kind of don't. And when you examine it, there's a lot of things in there. You could say, for example, okay, you can't budge on the salary, but maybe you can give me a signing bonus. That means you get a sort of one-time payment when you first sign on, right? So it's it's not recurring. It's not as good as, bumping up your recurring salary, but it's something, right? And then maybe you can renegotiate next year, right? Something like that if it works out. There's a lot of things in there. Sick days, vacation days, personal days. There's all that kind of stuff, like paid time off, right? There's the equipment, maybe they give you a company car, whatever, that's worth something to you. A company car you can take home after work, like on weekends, you can use it for personal stuff, that kind of thing. The company maintains the vehicle. You don't have to worry about taking it to a garage and paying the mechanic thousands of dollars or whatever, things like this, right? So there's other perks and other things you can get, even up to including things like that are really abstract, like your title. You say like, look, okay, I want more money. They say, no, we can only give you this. And you say, okay, but I'll tell you what, I'll take that if you change my title to this. It sounds more impressive. Sounds, like I command a bit more authority there, or something like that. It's a bit of an ego boost or something like that, right? I mean, there's a lot of these. You could turn it into like a lot of different things. So that's the idea. The idea is that even though it seems like a single dimensional deal, right? We're just talking pay. Usually you can turn anything into a multi-dimensional deal. It's a system, right? Even if you're buying a car, by the way, you go and you haggle with a used car salesman. They got their tweed plaid suit on, it's like purple and orange, right? And their bow tie, it's green with white polka dots on it. And you're haggling with these people and you're talking price, right? You can even extend that into a multi-dimensional deal. What about, a service contract? I bring it in, I get free oil changes or whatever. What about, I pay now and I pay later? There's all kinds of ways you could turn it into a multi-dimensional deal. So remember, you've got a lot of things to play with when you negotiate salary. It's one dimension of many, right? A lot of benefits. Sometimes companies that offer benefits, they can be, there's different benefit packages they could give, right? You say, okay, yeah, let's do that pay. That's fine. But, in order to make it work for me, if you give me the benefit package, not that the workers get, but that the managers get, you got it. I'll accept that pay and I can start whenever you want. Something like that, right? So there's a lot of things in there that you can negotiate with. So that's the deal is a system. Let's get back to questions here. Mehmet says, okay, I already answered that. Dr. Sid is back. I remember Dr. Sid. Dr. Sid is a member. When you're applying, isn't it always that you are in the back foot because you applied for the job? How to create a situation that the employer will have no other option but to say, we want you and we will pay whatever you want. Okay, so what you're basically saying is, okay, let me see if I can understand the ebonics here. When you're applying, isn't it always that you are on the back foot because you applied for the job? No, not necessarily. Like, you're not always on the back foot. Like I said at the beginning, negotiation is about having options, okay? If your only option is to take whatever these people give you or you're unemployed, you don't have any power, right? But if you got two other job offers in your back pocket, it's very easy to come here and say, listen, I need this. And they say, well, we don't pay that. It's like, okay, well, if you don't pay it, then goodbye, because I already have an offer for that. I'm just trying to see if you guys will match it or give me more, right? It's very easy to walk away from that. And you're not on the back foot at all, right? In fact, they're on the back foot because if they've chosen you and they've made you an offer, that means they've done all the background checks. They've had all the internal discussions and kicked it around and decided that you're the one they want. They're mentally resigned to you being the one that they're going to hire, right? And then you walk away and they're like, that sucks. That's painful. Now we've got to think what we're going to do. We're going to have to consider the runner-up. See if they're still available, by the way. Do all the background checks and stuff on them, blah, 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 like all this work. How do you feel about them? How do you feel about them? That kind of stuff. That's painful. You're lengthening the process. I'm going to turn down my brightness a bit. You know what I'm saying? That's painful. They want to avoid that. So if you come along and say, look, for an extra 5%, you got a deal. Most people are going to say, okay, fine, whatever. Just, 5%. Here's your 5%. Now, can we get rolling on this? Can we get a start date? Okay, so then you say, Dr. Sid, you say, how do you create a situation the employer will have no other option but to say, we want you and we'll pay whatever you want? Well, it's very rare that somebody says, we will pay whatever you want. Like, no matter what it is, we'll pay it, right? Said nobody ever. You can be in demand, and you can be in demand because you are exactly what they're looking for. It's just that simple, right? Now, what people are looking for varies, as evidenced by the fact that you've applied to jobs, right? So a lot of people have just rejected you outright. Nope, we're not even going to give you an interview. Not interested, non-starter, right? But other people have hired you. Not only do they say, we want to bring you in for an interview, but they were so impressed that they say, of all the people we've talked to, we want you, right? So tastes vary, what they're looking for varies, and the way you achieve what you're asking about, where they make you a wonderful deal, is you just happen to fit that, whatever these people are happening to look for, right? That's the name of the game. How do you achieve that? In a nutshell, you apply to a lot of places, you pursue a lot of opportunities, because somewhere out there is someone that thinks you're the absolute bomb. You have to first connect with that person. Then you have to do a high quality sort of application, and then you have to reach out to them in a very skillful way and present yourself very well, right? So it's a quality and quantity approach, right? It's stupid to say that because usually those are opposites, but unfortunately you need both of them in large measure to achieve this that you are asking about. Hopefully that makes sense, Dr. Sid, and thank you for being a member. Matthew says, what is your advice when interviewing for a supervisory role at a new company when you have not yet been a supervisor? What message to the hiring manager might actually be convincing? Okay, so generally what tends to work if they're open to someone who's not been a supervisor before is if you walk in there and you show that, first of all, you understand what the supervisor's role is. Okay, you know everything they have to do. You know everything that's expected of them, and you convince them, you signal that, like, that's not a problem, Like, I understand that, as a supervisor, I have to do this. I've done that before. I haven't had a problem with it. I know that sometimes when I do that, people push back in this way, and that's fine because I know that the reason they're doing it is X, and then what I do in return is Y, So it's not going to be a problem. So when they hear this, they go, oh, okay, so you seem like a person that, like, if we put you in this role, seems like you could handle it. You know what to do. You have a bit of experience with this stuff. You seem to know how it works. I don't have a lot of concerns that you wouldn't understand what to do and you wouldn't be able to handle it. You know what I'm saying? So what might help you is boning up, like studying up on what supervisors have to do. For example, a supervisor has to deal with insubordination, right? If you're in charge and you're in charge of a group of, 10 people or something, you supervise them, usually you would have some technical skill, so kind of what these people have to do, right? You maybe done it yourself. That usually helps, right? But a new thing that, a supervisor has to deal with that you wouldn't have had to deal with as a worker is you tell these people what to do and they say, no, screw you, we're not doing it, right? Then what do? How do you handle that, right? Now, do you lose your temper, or do you go cry in a corner, or do you completely go to pieces, right? Or do you kind of run around in circles not knowing what to do, how to get them to work, right? Or do you turn into like an absolute monster and, you know, you have profanity pouring from your mouth, you're yelling out abuse and threats and all? Like, is that the way to handle it? Like, you know? So this would be a new situation. So there are going to be a few standard things that you need to know how, when it comes to being a supervisor that you wouldn't have dealt with as a worker. So go and do some research. I was using ChatGPT earlier. Now, just to drive a point home and beat it to death, let's see here. Okay, so I am a first-time supervisor, and I've never been a supervisor before. What are some things that supervisors have to deal with that workers generally don't have to deal with? What are they, and how do you deal with them? You know, let's see what this thing says. You know, like the point I'm trying to make is that this is where you would maybe start looking into that, okay? Right? So, you know, you get an idea. So now if you go down to a job interview, for example, and you're prepared to talk about some of this stuff, like, you know, being accountable for other people's work. I know how that works. I know how to do it. Conflict management, right? There's a conflict between you and the workers. You say they should do a certain thing. They're telling you, sorry, we can't do that. How do you resolve that? You say, no, you're wrong. F you, get back to work. Is that kind of the way to handle that? Or is there a better way, right? Balancing relationships and authority, right? You're in charge, which means that, you know, you're the fearless leader, but, you know, you also kind of be one of, you know, like buddy with them. It's easier dealing with your friends than it is with your enemies. You know what I mean? How do you fix performance issues? People are not working right. Anyway, I could go through the whole thing, but so this would be a good start, because if you go down to a job interview, they're probably going to ask you questions pertaining to this stuff, right? They're going to say, like, how do you deal with conflict issues if you give a job assignment and a worker comes back and says, I can't do it or I don't want to do it? How would you handle that? So if you knock all those questions out of the park and you say, oh, well, you know, here's what I do this. They go, okay, right? And then it's not such a big problem. You've never been a supervisor before officially, right? Seems like you can handle it. And if they like you and you don't have a problem with the compensation or the working arrangements, you'd be a pretty strong contender. Mehmet says, if I have skills that is high in demand and low in supply, then I can negotiate better, right? But how to find out what are those skills? Well, it's very simple. Okay, here's some universal skills. First of all, getting along with this person is a damn important skill. If they like you and they want to work with you, that's probably the most important thing of all, right? There could be a million likable people in the world, but this boss doesn't work with them, right? But you're in this situation because you might be working with them, right? So convince them that, like, you know, you're the type of person they would get along with. How do you do that? You get along with them in the interview. You know, when they ask you a question, you don't go, you know, and then, or you say something kind of like, well, that's a dumb question, you know, or whatever. You kind of be friendly and nice. The idea is that when they leave the meeting or the interaction, you want them to think, wow, that was easy and that was fun. I'm kind of sad that's over. I like that person. You know, that's the kind of person I'd want to work with. Okay, so that's number one. If they hate your guts, if they think like, oh, that was awkward, that was uncomfortable, and that was a chore, you know, and I'm a little insulted, you know, like I'm agitated, you know, I didn't appreciate their comment about my weight, you know, or about my mother, you know, that they just sort of volunteered, you know, and in the first answer they gave, right? That's the opposite. It doesn't matter if you're like the most brilliant worker that they've ever seen. Is the boss going to hire you if you're going to like make them feel like that every day? Of course not. Right? So that's the idea, right? That's the number one thing. And then to give you a more detailed technical answer, then it depends on what you do, where you are, what other skills are prevalent. I don't know any of those things, so I can't answer that for you. But the soft skills are pretty much universal. Job interviews are pretty much almost entirely about soft skills. Regardless of what it seems like, that's the reality. They're about who you are as a person. If it wasn't about that, then they would have just given you a questionnaire or something, Why go through all the trouble of bringing you in, talking to you? Even like a video call is still more work. Having a real-time video call with somebody, doing it in real time, risk it being awkward and uncomfortable. They do all that because it's really about what you're like as a person. So if you can nail that, that's more than half the battle won. Okay, Northern Nomad says, yes, that is the case exactly with job applications, resumes, and interviews. Okay, yeah. I don't remember exactly what you're referring to, but I'm glad we're on the same page. Deepak says, you, sir, have an excellent way of communicating. I come to your channel just to learn. Well, thank you, Deepak. That's high praise indeed, and I appreciate it. And you're very gracious for taking the trouble to tell me that kind of thing. I wish more people would. Thank you. Frederick says, every day I learn that often behind criticism, when that happens, there's so much more not associated relative to the criticism itself. By listening and taking ownership, accountability, you learn a lot just by listening. Yeah, that's like, you also learn by probing, right? Hopefully everybody knows what I'm referring to. I'm not talking about probing in that way. I'm talking about like putting stuff out there, trying things. You want to see what this person thinks about that? Ask them about it. You want to see if they're open to this thing? Suggest it, and then you gauge their reaction. So you're not completely passive, just listening to what other people are doing and saying. You're actually trying to get responses, right? You're probing, you're trying to do things. Frederick says, downside is it takes a lot of energy decoding what the true reason is for the criticism. Exactly. So that's why you probe. You think like, okay, well, is that because, I've heard them shoot down a suggestion about, upgrading our computers. Okay. Now, is that because they're too cheap to do it and money's the concern? Or is it because the boss is not a computer person and they don't believe that computers are really that useful, and maybe that's where it's coming from? So how do you know? You don't know the reason why. All you know is that they said no. So let's probe further and see, maybe go and have a conversation with your boss about computers and say, hey, what do you think of this new software that came out or whatever? And, they go, I don't care about that. I don't like software. I've never used it. I heard it's something that's on a computer, but I don't know for sure, right? Then that kind of tells you something, right? But if you ask them a question about the budget or something like that, do we have the money in the budget to do this? Like, no, money's really tight. It's like, okay, right? So that also is a way to learn, generally speaking. Freedom Land says, how would you approach a job position that has multiple interviews with different top people in the company? That's quite common, actually. How would you approach it? Well, the key is to know who the hell you're talking to, right? A lot of like panel interviews and things, you go and you're talking to like 4 people on the other side of the table. Now, if you have no idea who they are, that makes it pretty damn tough. And it's also pretty hard to get the right answer if you don't know who is asking the question, right? So, for example, in a panel interview, I've said this so many times, but what really helps is if you have business cards. Like if you have a LinkedIn profile, go get the header of the LinkedIn profile essentially put onto a business card. Your name, your tagline, like, maybe you're between jobs, you don't have a job, that's fine. Like your background is in marine biology or something, right? So you say, Bill Todd, marine biologist, right? You have your phone number, your email, maybe other contact information. You have a headshot, right? Usually the same headshot you would have on your LinkedIn profile, right? And that's it, really. I mean, it's just a business card. So the idea is you go to a panel interview, and what makes it really easy is, when you get into the room and you meet all these people, it's like you take out your business card. If you have a chest pocket like I do, a business shirt, you have a chest pocket, take out your business card, start giving them out. That's a cue for other people to give you their business card. So it's like, okay, now I know who you people are. And then you put them on the table in front of you, aligned with the person, right? So there's like 3 people here. You have 3 business cards in front of you, 2 people there, another 2 business cards. So you know their name. You can like say, John, thank you, John, and then they correct you and say, Kevin, right? You know their name, and then you know who they are. You're the recruiter. You're the hiring manager. You're the CEO of the company. You're a consultant that consults on HR. Okay. And you're someone that I might be working with if I get this job, right? It's like, okay, now I know who I'm talking to. So when the CEO asks you a question, you know that they care more about attitude, ambition, that kind of thing. When the recruiter asks you a question, they care more about requirements. We're looking for someone with 5 years experience in this, so you frame your answers with that, right? Etc. Okay, it's so that's how you approach interviews with multiple people in it. Now, if you have multiple interviews and you're essentially giving the same interview over and over again, but just to different people, that also is a thing, right? Don't get offended. You might have already told all of this to some other person in a previous interview, but that was the recruiter. Now you're talking to the head of the division of the company or something like that. They don't know what question some recruiter asked you. They're asking it again, right? Don't get upset. Just give your answer again or tailor it to maybe this higher level person, right? Okay, and if you want the job, unfortunately, we have no choice but to go through these people's process, right? That's, if you want the job at the end of it, regardless of how cumbersome or annoying or even disrespectful sometimes the process might be, you have no choice but to go through it if you want the job. And so don't show signs of like anger or, impatience, at this, even though it may be damn hard. We got a couple of super chats. Thank you so much. This is from Vixen. Vixen says, I've used your videos each time I've needed a new job. 3 now. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully they get you stuff that lasts longer. I always got my counter offer approved. I used, this is good, this is fine, fair enough, and then make this number updated. I'll start tomorrow. Well, good. Yeah, that's what I advocate. When they're giving you an offer, if you get to that stage and you have to negotiate the offer, you like this unbroken babble that I do? There's never a pause. If you get the offer, the approach that I recommend is pick your battle. Like if it's the salary, then, push for that. Don't push for everything. Because if you're like, well, I want more vacation, I want more time off, I want negotiable hours, I want more remote work, I want more benefits, and I want more salary. It's like, no, they're going to just go, no, I'm sorry, this is just not worth it. But if you say, like Vixen was kind of echoing here, if you say, look, okay, vacation's fine. In all honesty, I'm actually used to more vacation than that. But you know what? For you guys, sure, that's fine. I'm not going to push this point, but fair enough. So vacation's fine. Sick days are fine. Benefits are, I'm used to having my own company car. That's what I've gotten previously, but whatever. Hey, it's okay. You guys might not roll like that, so that's fine. So, okay, fair enough. This is good. This is good. And this is good. Okay, now listen. If you can change that number to this, if you can like add, 10,000 or whatever, to this, then we got a deal. It looks perfect. And I can start whenever you want. Let me know the start date. That kind of thing. You make it very easy for them to say yes. And you signal that you're giving up some stuff. You could push for more, but you're deciding not to in the interests of, goodwill and not being argumentative. Let's just get through this. I just have one request, and that's this. If you can scratch that number out, write in this number, send it to me. I'll return it by Friday. We got a deal. I can start whenever you want. You make it really easy. So that's what I advocate for. So it's good to hear that worked for you, Vixen. And thank you for the super chat. Dr. Sid says, okay, understood very well. Thanks so much. You're awesome. Well, thank you. You're awesome. Everybody here is awesome. You are all highly valuable, highly employable. Out there right now is an employer that would love to hire you or love to work with you and give you the money that you're looking for and the conditions you're looking for. It's just that they're over here and you're over here and you're not connected. They're looking over here for you and you're looking over here for them and you're not connected, right? It's about connecting with people. That's why networking is so important. Freedom Lands is awesome. Freedom Lands sent me a super chat that says, thank you, Freedom Lands. I appreciate it. And you were asking some pretty intelligent questions. K. Ojo says, greetings from Raleigh. Or is it Raleigh? Raleigh, North Dakota? I'm Canadian, so I would say it the British way, which is Raleigh, but I'm sure that's not how it works. Knowing American pronunciation, it might be something like Raleigh or something. But right on, K. Ojo. Thank you for being here. You're awesome. If you have any questions about careers or job search, let me know. Freedom Lands. Northern Nomad says, Vixen like the super heroine from DC Comics, LOL. Yeah, Vixen. Vixen is... Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not a reader. I'm not a great reader of comic books, so that's lost on me. But I'm sure it was poignant, witty, and piquant at the same time. That's not easy to do. So Vixen appreciates that. Northern Nomad says, "You Canucks, yeah, you guys up there, yeah, with your as Canadian as apple pie, which we invented." And, where I am, we live in igloos. We take the dog sled to work every day. Even I do. I take the dog sled to work to do YouTube and consult with people. I wear my red and black plaid. Actually, I dress like a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police when I'm not online. So that's all you need to know. And we've reached the end of the chat. So with that, we've reached the end of the chat. Let me know if you guys have any questions. We covered salary negotiation. We talked about how negotiation is an entirely separate thing from persuasion. And the problem is that when you look online for tips on negotiation, almost always people don't talk about negotiation. Instead, they talk about persuasion. How to get them to see that your side of the argument is reasonable, and so they just agree to give you all the money you want. Unfortunately, that often doesn't happen. So we talked about that. We talked about principles of negotiation. You have a reservation price, which is the lowest amount of money you'd ever possibly accept. They have a reservation price, which is the highest amount of money they'd ever possibly pay. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes there's a difference in those numbers, which makes a zone of possible agreement, ZOPA, right? ZOPA. Or for the Americans, ZOPA, if you will, if that's the way you swing. And then the other thing that you should have is your BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So it's like your alternate option. So if you walk away from this, if you can't make a deal, make an agreement, then you have something else in your back pocket. You have another all-job offer or another opportunity or something lined up, right? It's the best alternative to this working out, right? And negotiating power comes entirely from having other options. If you have no other options but unemployment, you really have no negotiating power. So the way to win at negotiation is to go out and get different options and know what those options are, right? It's great being able to negotiate. Anybody here ever negotiated an employment contract while you've had another job offer in your back pocket? That's usually fun. You can go in there. You don't have to be polite. I mean, it makes sense to be polite, but you don't have to be. And, they say, well, here's, what we offer. You say, I'm sorry, not good enough. And then, you kind of say, this is what I need. And they kind of come close to it. And you say like, okay, well, listen, I'll get back to you, right? People love that. It can be fun. So that's the key. It's about pursuing multiple things, having multiple options. Not everybody has the luxury of doing that, of course, right? I'm not an idiot. I realize that, but that should be the goal. Now, if you don't have an offer, at least if you had a lot of interviews lined up, things like that. So if they're only offering a terrible deal, you don't feel too bad about saying, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me. I need this. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work out. I got several things lined up. Hopefully one of them will work out. Vixen says, yes, it's super fun, especially if it's a potential competitor. Yeah. Okay. There are 14 people here. Get in the chat. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm here to talk about anything you guys want with regard to careers and job search. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for more questions, check out my courses. I've got this that's probably of interest to people here. If you kind of don't know how to get hired, you don't know how everything works, all my advice is all in one place right here. And the real value of that course is understanding the hidden job market. And especially if you're introverted, then you will like this, because this gives you a practical way to network for introverts. Okay, so you can access the hidden job market directly. And for those who don't know, I'm going to do it just because I don't have any questions at the moment. But here. So of all the jobs that are posted, or sorry, let me start that again. Of all the jobs that exist, how many of them are posted in terms of percentage? Okay, some people don't know this, and this is like a major, major, major thing for doing a job search campaign. Okay. It keeps changing its tune. It's said anything from between 10% and like 40%. Today it's saying 30 to 35%. Now the reality is it's about 15 to 20. That's the reality. Okay. So only 30 to 35% of all jobs are publicly posted. That means 65 to 70% of jobs, what they refer to as the hidden job market. Okay. They are not posted. And these are jobs that you can get that are available to you. It's just that you discover them not by doing an internet job search. You discover them by doing some form of networking. Okay? So learn about this stuff. And if you want to learn about that stuff with me, check out that course. I basically share with you a method I use to build a consulting business, which involved networking, which is exactly the same method you use for job search. So I walk you through that. And, not only does it yield the good jobs, much better jobs than what's posted publicly, but you have a higher chance of getting them, better than competing with 800 people for a posted job. But the bonus is that it's a more positive process. You're not treated like cattle generally. You're treated more like a human being. You're treated like a referral. People want to speak with you. They invite you in, So you do everything remotely until you've gotten people to invite you in. They're interested in hiring you and they want to talk to you. And usually this isn't some grunt recruiter. This is usually the boss that wants to talk to you. They know all about you and they've independently decided to bring you in and said, like, listen, you should come down because we might have an opportunity for you. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, if you want to get into tapping the hidden job market, going after some of these other jobs that are not posted, check out that course. That's my sort of solution for that. It's stuff that I haven't really disclosed on my proper YouTube channel publicly, because it's a lot of principles that stack on top of each other. You can't just break it into 5-minute conversations and post those, right? Because they're dependent on a lot of things. So I go through everything they're dependent on and then build it up. And then you see how everything works. And then you see, here's what to do. And then you understand why it works. Okay, so anyway, if you're interested in that, check out that course. There's links in the descriptions. Failing that, check out this one if you're interested in developing your communication skills. Basically climbing the ladder. If you are a worker, you want to work as a supervisor, want to work as a manager, you want to sort of go upwards, make more money, that kind of thing, learn more things. Some people do, some people don't. Both are fine. But if you do, then developing your communication skills are really, really important. They're probably the most important thing, apart from likability. And that teaches you how to develop your communication skills, specifically what to do. So check that out. Freedom Land says, what's the proper way to reject a job offer but still keep the door open for future opportunity that's better? I don't want to come off arrogant. Okay, first of all, Freedom Lands. First of all, actions speak louder than words. And the fact is, you are rejecting an offer. Okay, now, no matter how eloquently you do it, okay, the fact of the matter is you're rejecting an offer. So sometimes there's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do that will make them want to consider you in the future, because you've shown your true colors. You've shown how you behave. And the way you behave is when they bring you, this is an offer, right? Rejecting a job offer. Usually when they reject an offer, it's painful to have someone reject an offer, right? It's not really painful for them to just withdraw from the running. That doesn't affect them. But if they undertake this process where they're going on a quest for the right person, and then they find the right person, and that's you, and they put a lot of work into doing that, and they put a lot of work into you specifically, and then you turn around and reject their offer, right? And it doesn't work out. That causes them pain. It's embarrassing for the recruiter who recommended you. It's embarrassing for the hiring manager that decided to pick you. It's they have to redo some work they did with you with someone else, right? It's painful. So a lot of times it's not a matter of like, what's the thing I can say that will smooth this over? There may not be anything you could say, right? Now the good manners and etiquette is just to reject it very graciously and say, listen, this is a tremendous offer. You guys are offering a very valuable thing here. A lot of people would be lucky to receive this kind of offer. I certainly appreciate it. Unfortunately, it's not that I don't want it, it's that I can't accept it. I wish I could, but unfortunately, circumstances dictate that I can't, and I regret this. And I really hope that in the future, if my situation changes, that perhaps we may be able to do something in the future that does work out. And then I apologize. It's a very gracious offer. I'm sure you'll find the right person, and I wish you every best of luck. Every best of luck, whatever. I'm just making this up off the top of my head, so that's why it's not very good. But something like that, right? That's probably good. And that's probably more than you need to say, but saying all that and getting into those kind of things, people at least appreciate the protocol, the gesture, right? So that's how I do it. And then what can help next time is, instead of like applying for the job through the posted job market, if you ever want to go back there, you ever want to take up this same opportunity again, connect with the hiring manager, the one you had to say no to, connect to them outside of the hiring process. Like just message them on LinkedIn or say, could we do an informational interview, or, something like that, right? And that will help rebuild the relationship. And then if you're wanting to see if, you could have that offer again, then there's maybe a chance. If you don't know what any of those things are, you don't know what an informational interview is, you don't know how to reach out to people, it's in that course if you're looking for the definitive guide on that. Vixen says, when I've been actively interviewing, I played your videos through the day so I can be on top of my A game. I can't thank you enough. Out of other YouTube channels, you have been most helpful. Well, thank you very much. That's very nice for you to say, Vixen. I appreciate your support. I appreciate your words. That's really awesome. And you give me encouragement to continue doing this. So thank you. There are 17 people here. Get in the chat. Let me know what's up with you if you're wondering about anything. We are at the 1 hour and 16 minute mark or thereabouts. So I could go a little bit longer if people want me to. Yeah, getting the brightness of my cameras is always a concern for me. It shouldn't be in this day and age, but it is. And I also noticed that my two cameras are, I guess it's not so bad, but you have one camera where you're like this, and then another camera where you're like this, so it just looks a bit weird. You're like, your height's changing all the time. There, like that? But that's the genius of somebody filming like a window right behind them. Sorry, I keep messing with my setup here. Very unprofessional. But that's okay, because Microsoft this year, I think, is forcing everyone to get a new computer. At least people like me. I'm still using a machine I built in, I checked, it was 2011 when I built this computer. I used to be a tech guy. I actually ran a small software company at one point. And so like 25 years ago or something. So, skills don't matter anymore. They're not even relevant. They're not pertinent. They're not germane. They're not cogent to what's going on right now. And so I built this computer, and I've used it ever since. And it's 14 years old now. Haven't upgraded it. But this year, everybody has to, because we have to run Windows 11. So whether you want to or not, right? Or you could just go Apple, I suppose. Deepak says, when job hunting, should I apply to many jobs in parallel or one by one, waiting for each response? Oh, wow, Deepak. In parallel, my friend. Do not do the other thing you said, like in series. First of all, usually, most of the time, you will not hear a response. Your application will go into a void. Sometimes companies send like an email or something that they say, thank you, we have received your application. We will let you know, right? Just to confirm they received it. Sometimes you don't get that, right? But the likelihood of hearing back is very small. It's for sure under 10%. A lot of people, it's under 1%, depending on what you're doing, right? So that means you apply to 100 jobs and you get an interview for one of them, or not even, right? That is not uncommon, right? So you can't like apply in series, like one after another, and wait to hear. It doesn't work like that. You need to apply to many, many, many things, all in parallel. And then if you're lucky, you'll get a bite here and a bite there. Someone will call you in for an interview. Someone will call you in for a screening phone call, like that kind of thing. Someone will say, okay, let's do a video interview with you. So you're getting a bite here, a bite there, right? And this is after you've applied to hundreds and hundreds, right? You can easily apply to 100 jobs in a day if you're applying to posted jobs. Easy. What some people do is they have like one version of their resume and maybe one version of their cover letter that they change the greeting on, like dear, and then fill in the name, right? But it's the same letter, right? And then they blast that out. Now, if you're doing that, you could literally apply to 1,000 jobs in a day. You could apply to every job you see, just, here you go. Now, the likelihood is that will not work. You will not get a single call back if you do that. Because the thing is, because there are so many people applying for jobs, they can afford to be very picky, very, very picky. We only want someone that matches exactly what we said we're looking for. Oh, you don't match exactly? Okay, then forget it. Right? That's how that works, because there's so many applicants. So usually the way you do this and have it actually go somewhere is you're going to hate this, but you have to tailor each resume you send and each cover letter you send, if you send cover letters. Right? It should be specifically tailored to what that employer says, like, we're looking for this. You have to speak directly to those, right? Okay. Now, if you're doing networking, like I talk about networking, I talk about the things you can do, especially if you're an introvert. You can network online. You can use social networking and email and things. And there are some things you can do, right? Same idea applies there. Just like job interviews, you blast out a lot of things, and then you hope that some of them come back to you. With networking, it kind of works the same way. You blast out a lot of requests. Hire me. You blast out like, hey, let's get together and talk. I have some questions I'd love to ask you. Whatever. And you hope that some of them come back, right? The likelihood of the networking stuff coming back is much higher, by the way. But for people that are just applying to posted jobs, this is the name of the game. It's all in parallel, and you have to do a lot. And you have to, like I said earlier, you have to put some quality into it. You can't just blast out a generic thing that will probably lead to no results. So hopefully that makes sense. Deepak. It's my close personal friend, Alpine's pal. We're like this. We go right back to the good old days. Let's see. Alpine's pal says, "Good morning, Bill," or afternoon, depending on your time zone and depending on your point of view. Question: why should I send a thank you note, considering that basically every business has insane traffic of work? Or maybe it's just nosy. Well, if there's something I can't stand, it's a person who's nosy. I think these people should be lined up against the wall and shot. That would actually be far too good for them. I think it goes assault, rape, murder, nosiness. Okay, the reality is there's two reasons why you should. Number one, if you can actually write a good thank you note, most people can't, but if you can, right, then the recruiter or whoever will genuinely appreciate it. Okay? What does a good thank you note look like? Well, you say something genuine. You don't say a bunch of cliched BS. You actually say something they did for you that you appreciated. Right? When I came down for the interview and you pointed me to the waiting area and showed me where the washroom is and asked me if I needed a drink and asked me if you could take my jacket, and I really appreciated your hospitality. A lot of places, they won't do that, but you did. That really signals that you guys, are great to deal with. And you made me feel welcome. And I appreciate that. You're not talking about some generic crap. You're not saying some nice sounding thing. You're saying something that somebody actually did, and you're being genuine. You're saying, I genuinely did appreciate that. Thank you very much. Right? Now, if someone gets annoyed when you send that kind of message to them, then they got problems, right? It's not on you, it's on them. Okay, secondly, the other reason why you would send a thank you note is that if every other candidate that they interviewed sent a thank you note and you didn't, you're standing out in a bad way, right? You're the only one that didn't appreciate what they did by giving you an interview. So you don't want to be that person. So it's just a good idea to send a thank you note when you get an interview. So hopefully that makes sense. Those are two reasons right there. Vixen says, in 2023, I needed a new job and I applied for 1,200 jobs in June. I got 3 bites. It's a numbers game. Keep it up. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's what the posted job market is like. You know, it's like very, very high ratios. You apply to 1,000 jobs and you get what? What is this? A 0.3% response rate, give or take? Something like that. So imagine if you did all those in series, it would be, you couldn't do it, right? You would never get anything. Okay, so anything you can do to increase the quality of your applications, that's why AI and stuff is like a real tool, because it's not that it's doing something that you can't, it's just that it's doing it faster. And if you've got 1,200 applications to send that are tailored to their jobs, that's a hell of a lot of work. That's an F of a lot of work, if I could, if I could be so bold. Right? So that's where AI tools and stuff are very, very useful. There's a clear difference between the people that are using AI tools and the people that aren't at playing this game. The ones that aren't are losing out because they're capable of doing the work. It's just that they can't do 100 in a day. They can do 3 in a day. You know what I mean? Okay, so if you're applying online, that's kind of the name of the game, to post to jobs. Deepak says, how would you approach this if it were your first time? Like, are you saying, how would I get a job if it was my first job? Well, if it was my first job, I would probably be totally clueless and not have any idea what I was doing. That certainly was how it turned out. I can't even remember my first job. I had some casual jobs back in the day, and then I worked in a circus. I was the guy who tied the trapeze back to the column, right? Before I gained like 300 pounds, and aged by 35 years. So yeah. But look, there's many different ways of getting a job. About 3 weeks ago, I did a video that basically says how I'd get a job. Okay. Now, in that video, it's like 45 minutes long. I cover 11 different methods of getting a job, and I go through each one. So maybe go watch that video, and that'll give you an idea of the type of things you can do. And then different people will gravitate to different methods, depending on what your personality is and what your situation is, right? Okay. Okay, so like it doesn't make sense for me to go into like general principles. Just go watch that video. That'll really help. There's many different ways of getting a job. I can't say what would be appropriate for you or what wouldn't be, but it gives you an idea of the stuff that's possible. Freedom Land says, what knowledge benefits did you receive from your MBA? Did your MBA actually improve your business skills from what it was previously? Absolutely. That's like saying, okay, you're a carpenter. You're a master carpenter, right? Okay. Well, this whole like trade school thing, did that help you in any way? It's like, yes, I learned my craft. Now, I was doing carpentry before in my garage, like at an amateur level, so you don't need to go to trade school to learn how to build a shed or something. You know what I mean? Like there's some things you can do, right? But there's a hell of a lot you do learn by learning your craft. So that's like what an MBA is. It's basically like, here's how business works. And if you don't have an MBA, you don't have any idea what you're missing or what there is. You see, the thing is, this is an old debate, and it's actually the topic of a live stream I'm going to be doing on Friday, coincidentally. Can you succeed despite not having an MBA, like in management? Because some industries, they really value education, like banks and financial services, as an example. They pretty much require you to have an MBA to like move you into management. And then you have other industries that they completely don't respect education. Experience is everything. I don't care that you flunked out a grade, like 7th grade, You've been doing this for 35 years, therefore we're going to put you in charge of the entire company. I've seen that. I'm not even joking. That's like literally what goes on in some industries, construction. So, you know what I mean? Here's the deal. If you work in an industry that's mature, it's slow moving, it's been around for a while, and it's basically settled into like, here's the standard way we do things. This is how we've done them for the last 30 years. This is how we're expecting that they'll be done in 30 years' time. This is how we do them, right? Nothing really changes. If that's the type of industry you're in, what you'll probably see is you'll see a lot of people getting hired, not from education, but from experience. They shadow somebody, they learn how that person does their job, and then they move into that job as their replacement when that person retires. And then this is what you saw them do, this is what you continue to do, and that's how you do your job. And if nothing changes, that works fine, right? The problem is that if something does change, right, all of a sudden because of new technology or new weird things going on with the economy or new competitors entering the market, now all of a sudden things are changing. And the old way of doing business suddenly doesn't work anymore, right? That's when you're screwed. Because if you learned your entire job by shadowing somebody, by seeing what they do, and then you just replicate it, and all of a sudden that doesn't work anymore, now you don't know what to change. And like what would you change? And what would the change be? You don't know. The only way to learn now is trial and error. You kind of check what other people are doing. How are you doing this? How are you doing that? And you like pick up little tips. You don't really know what's the right thing to do, right? So that's the risk. Okay. The purpose of education, the purpose of learning something like business or any craft is because if you have to solve a problem that you've never solved before or something you've never done before, right? That's where the education comes in. You're benefiting from the learning of like hundreds of thousands of other people that have studied this stuff throughout history and throughout the world, that have done all kinds of different things. They've condensed down their learning and they've given you a sort of guidebook, like a playbook. This is how it works. This is how you solve this problem. This is how you solve this problem. Now, that's where the learning comes in. Like, okay, I've never dealt with this exact situation before, but I know from the theory and from all my training that this type of solution will be the one that's likely to work out because people have tried everything and this is what they've seen and this is what they found and they've taught you that principle. So you say, okay, let's start with this. The solution is usually something that looks like this. So I'm going to start with that. If you don't have that education, you don't know that, right? So then it becomes like hearsay, this person says do that. That person says do that, right? So an MBA, for example, or any like master's degree, I assume, will teach you that, right? That's where education complements how capable you are. Experience matters a hell of a lot. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, that's why a lot of people rise, because they do have experience. They've done every job, so they know what the deal is. They have a insight into a lot of things. But you pair education with that means that they can do things they've never done. They can adapt to new situations, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I could go on, but that's basically the answer. Okay. You need both, really, to be capable in most situations. Just having one, just having like education without any experience, that's not very good because you are just clueless. You don't understand basic things, and you go about things wrong on a personal level. And just having experience but not having any education, that's pretty bad too. Both of these people don't realize that what they're seeing is incomplete and what they have is incomplete, but it is. Deepak says, thank you. I'll definitely do that. Okay. That was the approach. Yeah. Check out that video. It'll help you. And Freedom says, great answers. Well, thank you. Okay. We've been doing this for an hour and a half. There's 23 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. I'm going to take a little bit of an intermission. I will be back in 25 minutes with another live stream that's scheduled on my channel. It's not how to get hired. It's something called Honest HR Nitrous. That's where we talk about the same kind of thing, but not about the theory, really. It's about the gritty reality of how job search tends to be, like with ghosting and fake jobs and rude recruiters. So if you have more questions, come back in like 20 minutes or so, and we'll continue. Thanks so much. You guys are awesome. Thank you for everybody who participated. Thank you for the thank you to Vixen and to Freedom Lands for the super chats. You guys are especially awesome. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon.